Hello, YouTube. Welcome to Doug's Thoughts. I'm your host, Doug Robbins, and this is a podcast by a creative writer for creative writers. As you may or may not have noticed, Why I Write Horror. That's the title of the YouTube video. And why do I write horror? It's literally just what I think have the most interesting type of villains, characters, plots. Um, you know what I mean? Because it's like this. Dale, we got to work on our relationship. And that's the whole fucking movie. You know what I mean? And like he can go, have all these affairs and, like a fucking sleazy ass soap opera or something. You know what I mean? Like, oh, well, Dale, he lost that relationship. I'm so glad you're with, Della now. Fuck you. I'd like to see some kind of punishment, like, and just losing your relationship or your marriage, that ain't good enough. You're an asshole like that and somebody puts a machete in your head, that's more satisfying. Great catharsis. Um, and again, is it real? No. I had heard the theory people like horror because it's not real. And I mean, it's true. I mean, you watch a documentary about some serial killer and, you know, it's it's real. So, and it's got that uncomfortable aspect to it, obviously, because, real person or real people, excuse me, had to get hurt for the killer's whatever fucked up fantasy modes of revenge or whatever. Um, it's kind of like the kids that, and I used to do it too, but I wasn't one of these dumbasses that like, hey, let's take a fluorescent light tube and jump off my roof through a bunch of tables. But like the Slender Man killings, those two teenage girls that killed for Slender Man. I'm like, if you want to be like a character in a movie, just like if you want to be like those wrestlers on TV, here's what you do. You say, John Carpenter, let me be in this fucking movie. Pay me millions of dollars to be in your fucking movie. And it'll all be pretend. Vince McMahon, I'll go to wrestling school. You pay me to go play fight in my underwear. That's cool. You dumbasses with no training, no money, are going out there, and even if you play fighting, some of you getting really hurt because you're, doing as seen on TV, but really you're not being anything like the people on TV because they're fucking smart enough to know that this is fake. And, they got the training, they got to be in movies, or they got to be in a wrestling show. You dumbasses just pour outside your fucking trailers, knocking each other over the head with steel chairs. Or really killing somebody because of this pretend movie thing character. I mean, what kind of fucking nonsense is that? You know what I mean? Durr. But and again, Tim Wagner, which again, now that it's payday, I had to book, had to get rid of it. But I'm, thinking of getting Halloween Kills, the novel, again, because Tim Wagner wrote that. And again, he talks about, he's written everything from cozy horror to extreme horror. And, I'll read just the title. And it's like, horror is so diverse because, like, even he'll tell you there's more of that entertainment based horror, which is what I'm into, more than like, you know, hi, I'm Jack Ketchum. Uh, this group of neighbor boys are going to go rape your daughter in a very realistic way. You know what I mean? And again, people. I mean, people are, yeah, they're sheep. A lot of people are ignorant. A lot of people lack self awareness, and they think because there's violence in the horror movies I watch that it's just all bad doom and gloom. When really it's like, no, dumbass. Not only do I do that to kind of turn off emotions, because again, if you've ever seen the Avengers, when the Incredible Hulk said, "I'm exposed like a nerve," um, and it's from a motherfucker that took goddamn Thor's hammer to his jaw. Um, not only lived, but is still the most badass character in that movie. Um, because imagine being so uncomfortable in your skin that everything interacting with certain members of your family, being afraid you're going to be judged or name called or and so uncomfortable around people and just wanting to kind of hide away from the world. And the movies I found were not just escapes, but I could turn off my emotions for a while and find comfort in these kind of movies. You know what I mean? And then to get criticized by ignorant people, in your own family, mind you, that are saying, Jesus Christ, it's Christmas Eve, give the spooky shit a rest. Well, I'm just trying to watch Halloween 4. Well, it's like, I'm sorry, dude, that I like the characters. I like Halloween. I like Michael Myers. And I love Christmas. Christmas is still my favorite holiday. And it's just, you know what I mean? And wanting to take those interests away, just like it was called the Encyclopedia of Serial Killers. 11 years old, Easter gift. Overheard because I remember, my mom. I knew it was like one I knew ahead of time because I could hear through the. And again, it wasn't one where I had my ear up to the door. I could hear. I was like maybe, even though the door was closed, I was because I could never close my door at my old house. Uh, but I was standing out in the hallway, and my dad told mom was like, "Oh, he's probably going to be a serial killer." Just because of a fucking Easter gift. That again, as many crime shows as he's watched, how many times Iceman documentary, you know what I mean? Now people say, you're 11 years old, that's too young for this. And again, like John Carpenter said, just like in the 50s with Dr. Wortham talking about juvenile delinquency, he's like, well, I have news for him, poor guy. Didn't turn me into a juvenile delinquent. Turned me into a movie director. So again, And again, in in college, writing horror, and I had a creative writing professor that wanted me to try to write to kind of expand and polish my writing, which again is not a bad thing in and of itself. But it was like, that's a point I'd like to make in the video again. And you can think about this, and it's not bad that you're made or challenged to try to write outside of your comfort zone. Absolutely. But I mean, don't let it create anxiety in you. And if it's like a big part of you, like again, this isn't just like horror to me. This is just what I like. And I'm always a little confused and dumbfounded. I'm like, motherfucker, I could be into the real intense shit. You know what I mean? Like some stupid shit like Martyrs. That's like seriously fucked up. Just to traumatize you, just to fuck you up. Without any hint of story. Because again, a lot of people talk about all the Saw movies. But there were threads where they paid, yes, it was violent, but there was kind of fight for your own redemption, and there were smart puzzles. It was like just as much a detective story as it was not a slasher, but like the traps, they weren't like Amanda's traps in 2, where it's like, well, there's no escape from these. Like, no, man, there's got to be a way to get out of them. Because it's like, you want to live, fight for it, and yeah, it should cost you something. Um, you know what I mean? But there's so many different facets in the horror genre that again, I just want to. When I was a kid, I just thought, hey, I'm going to be an actor in Hollywood. I'm basically just going to get cast in all the Halloween movies, all the Jason movies, maybe some Chucky movies. Like, I thought I would make a career out of that. Because again, I feel like as a viewer, I got a very simplistic mind, and because a lot of people say, well, I got a message. And if I have a message, I might write a short story, maybe. But maybe short stories, but poetry and essays, if I got a real deep, on the nose message, yeah, I'll write those. But if I'm writing a book, if I'm writing a movie, something longer, or even a longer piece of fiction, between like short story and novella and even novelette length, uh, brother, I want it to be entertaining. You know what I mean? I don't care about some on the nose message because, I mean, my God, with YouTube, I mean, right now I'm able to get on YouTube and just blab like, oh, I got a thought here. I want to talk about this. I can hop on YouTube. I can hop on social media. I can hop on the title "Hop on Pop" popped in my head, but I didn't want to say it. It's like, oh no, that sounds weird. But see, that's one of those where you don't know. You want to make the reference, but you don't because you don't want to sound weird. But so there it is. Hop on Medium, not hop on Pop. Hop on Medium, or hop on Vocal. These writing platforms, and just be like, all right, world, here's Here's my thought process. You know what I mean? And I do think it is a good thing to be, I don't know if you'd say challenged in the way, but for people like, I don't know, a parent, a teacher, to say, well, he or she can write um, other stuff than just horror, this genre. And again, I've attempted, and some stuff I write, and it hasn't been horror, um, and it's been good and it's been fun, but it came from when I was ready, when I wanted to. Because you try to force it, Jack, that shit ain't happening. And I don't think you should feel pressure to. But at the same time, I say go for it. And if you fail, if you're like, because I keep trying. Uh, I started a story up there. I don't even know if I finished it. It's about Santa Claus, and he has a daughter that moved to Florida. She's a romance author, and she had always wanted to move to Florida. Because she was Candy Claus. Because I thought, like sweets and candy and Christmas, blah blah. Blah. And in that world, the mom, Mrs. Claus, which I always think of being Jessica Claus, just because of that Santa Claus coming to town from like 1970 or whenever, in the 70s. I think it was 1970, but don't quote me. Uh, but instead, I think he was granted immortality in that by the Winter Warlock, whereas this was just, you know, in my story, Santa's wife was a witch that granted him the immortality to be the immortal gift giver. Um, and Jessica Claus, or excuse me, Candy Claus doesn't, and I don't even know if I'll finish this, but she doesn't have any powers of her own, which, thinking of it kind of sounds like they weren't sure if Tabitha was going to and be witched, but she wound up having them. Well, it's like Halloween Town, where they thought the kid, but like Candy Claus was not going to be immortal, and she didn't want to be. Um, and I was like, and I can't remember what the original premise was, but it was just going to be like she's a romance. I think it was going to be a romance story, but then she tells her dad, she's like, "Hey, it's like congratulations on the book sale, and there's an old abandoned lighthouse that's haunted." And Santa chuckles and tells her that it's like, "Oh, you're just like your mom, with that you love ghost hunting and shit like that." And so even that has to be, which again, I'm always going to write more. I think fantastical, fantasy tinge stuff, just because for the most part, I like worlds fictionally, in movies, in books, where magic can happen and fantasy creatures can happen. And a lot of, horror has fantasy elements, absolutely. And, but again, it's staying true to yourself and taking back and kind of, telling the world, "Hey, motherfucker, fuck you. Because again, I got a movie on YouTube, I got one in pre production, and now the tables have turned. Because, now it's like back in the day, my dad never would have asked me, it's like H2O, because I was watching something on it. What'd you think of that? Back then, he wouldn't have fucking asked that. He wouldn't ask my opinion. You know what I mean? But now that I've gotten movies made and, been published and doing all that, now all of a sudden, it's like, again, it's like I remember standing in line over Christmas shopping, dad, brother, and myself. It was at Sears, and I can't remember, but it was taking forever, and my dad wasn't even part of the purchase, but it's like he was still getting annoyed. He's like, yeah, there's a lot. Clay's a lot more patient or jovial than I am. Blah blah blah. You know, and now he's like, now I feel like, oh shit. If Clay wasn't so fucking philanthropic, didn't like to help people, wasn't so kind, then he wouldn't be helped. My dad wouldn't be helped out as personally as he has been. And now I've got all this stuff published, and I've actually had a movie made and put on YouTube, and another one in pre-production. So what I want to tell all you writers out there is that if you want to, because you want to, or you think those people have a point, because again, if you want to look at it from those people have a point, absolutely. But if the stakes are, you're more important to write what you want if it's meaningful to you. Because that's all I did. I wrote the stories that I just wanted to see more of in the world. And if it's like knockoff 75, a Halloween or Child's Play or The Conjuring or a Friday the 13th movie or whatever, then that's me and it's personal to me. And again, that may get me a smaller audience, or it may get me the bigger audience, because if I write something I think will have mass appeal, but I'm not that into it, you being less into it will just make it worse. Versus if you got the passion of, okay, I like writing ghost stories, slashers, and you write that. And again, I feel like even when they are traditional, even if I write a ghost story, even if I write a slasher story, some of them that feel more like imitating, but I feel like usually, like ghost story wise, Jeremy's House, I was like, because as far as paranormal goes, I think Lorraine Warren talked about I don't know, ghosts being I can't remember, but it was yeah, basically don't invite the ghosts in, like Ouija boards and shit like that. And so, to me, in my mind, I was writing from the premise of that's really bad. To like bring them, that's where they'll be the most, the strongest. So I'm like, Guy gets lonely on Halloween night, and he's like, I'm going to summon a succubus because they have sex with you. Which is kind of a challenge and is literally doing the worst thing to bring in a demon that will make physical contact that feeds off you. You know what I mean? Which, from that angle of purposefully trying to see, all right, what happens if you really invite, like, do what sounded like it was the worst of inviting it in, as opposed to just, I move into a haunted house, happens to be haunted. Um, like, we didn't ask for it or bring it in, it just was here. Jeremy's house, but it was like kind of comical and scary because it was, again, kind of challenging him because he is so over this haunting. Uh, but and his brother's worried about him. And he's like, hey, you don't believe me? Go lay upstairs in that room. And I mean, dude's pinned down, fucking breathing on him and shit. And it just screams in his ear, get out. I mean, and then he leaves, and then the fucking bloody ass Frank style from Hellraiser comes down and sips his coffee or does or something. And he's like, you never scare me. You don't scare me. You never do. Which is kind of an invitation of how aggressive these spirits are and how haunted it is, but how he doesn't give a shit. And like the implication of it's funny, but I also feel like there's a greater, it's kind of a challenge by him not caring because most people would see this and get the fuck out, whereas he's so over it. It's kind of a challenge to the spirit of like, hey, how far can you go? So thanks for watching and have yourselves a great night.